Hello everyone, welcome back. So Godot 4.4 was just released. Let's go through this blog post. So a unified experience, looking forward to plenty of quality of life improvements hidden within this release. Faster load speed, reduced stutter, streamlined process, spotting all the optimization that have been applied in the background will take some time. On top of that, long awaited comfort features like embedded game windows and interactive in-game editing will feel more in line with other software on the market, making transitioning between them an even smoother experience. The editor overhaul alone takes a big chunk of this release after all. Before you update, before transitioning your existing projects to Godot 4.4, carefully read through our migration guide to learn about breaking changes. So if you want, you can download it. Then highlights: Jolt into action, Jolt physics. The Jolt extension has always been used as the de facto physics engine by many Godot developers since its inception in late 2022. So it only made sense to integrate into the engine directly. Jolt physics itself is actually a standalone open source physics engine, and its creator helped immensely with the Godot bindings. While this PR might be one of the most rigorously tested ones, we are eagerly awaiting your feedback and GitHub issues to eventually be able to drop the experimental label on this addition. Until then, you have to enable this alternative to Godot physics in the project settings. Before you do, make sure to check if your interest use cases are properly supported in the documentation. Second, embedded game window. Godot runs the game as a separate process from the editor for two reasons. Avoid having to share resources as much as possible. In case of a game crash, keep the editor running to avoid data loss. However, this design choice previously prevented embedding the game window into the editor, which is something that users with limited screen space like on a single monitor setup or laptops are looking for. Thanks to some window management tricks, it is now possible to embed the game seamlessly and interact with the rest of the editor while still keeping the process separate in the background. Note that this only works on Linux, Windows and Android for now. Support for macOS will require a different approach for technical reasons. Interactivity in game editing. Modifying your game from within the editor while it is still running or paused has never been easier. This release lets you click on elements within the scene and move the camera, allowing you to explore your game worlds in ways not possible before. Then make games in VR. Android editor support for XR devices. Because the Godot editor itself is a project made with the engine like any other, it can be made available in more unconventional places like the web or on mobile. With this release, the first steps have been taken to use OpenXR to transfer the existing Android editor into the context of XR headers, currently supported on Meta Quest 3, Quest 3S and Quest Pro. Uber exciting, Uber shaders to reduce stutter. Uber shaders are at load time pre-compiled versions of each shader with all their features. These shaders become the fallback whenever a new object is drawn, so that freezing as we wait for the more specialized shader pipeline in the background to compile becomes a thing of the past. This technique therefore completely avoids shader stutter. The improvement from this change will be noticeable in most games without requiring any content changes. In some cases, the Uber shader won't work. However, refer to the workarounds for shader stutter in the official documentation to learn about simple fixes. We are already in the process of updating our existing shader to take advantage of this new infrastructure. Then 3D physics interpolation. With Godot 4.3, we introduce physics interpolation for your 2D projects. In this release, the long-awaited 3D counterpart has been merged as well. Make sure to enable it in your project settings by decoupling physics ticks and display frame rates. Physics interpolation creates additional frames between the last physics position and the current one. This reduces jitter and creates a smoother experience, especially on displays with higher refresh rate. Mobile games in particular benefit from this change, since you can now lower the tick rate without compromising on smoothness. The cool new kid on the block, AGX tone mapping. This tone mapping algorithm has gained a lot of popularity lately. Our friends at Blender even replaced their previous filmic tone mapper with AGX. The Godot implementation resembles theirs closely, but it is purposefully simplified to be more suitable for real-time use cases. AGX gives a movie-esque quality to renders and is capable of handling very bright scenes better than other available options. Then type dictionary, your request have been heard. Type dictionaries are coming to Godot. This impacts the core engine, JDScript, and all other scripting languages when interfacing with Godot's dictionary type. The inspector UX has been improved accordingly to let you assign the right keys and values directly in the editor. Then general improvements. First one is core, harder, better, faster, and stronger optimizations. Now that the core feature set of Godot 4 feel stable, our contributors have shifted their efforts towards optimizing them across the board. While many of the linked PRs were finished and tested before the 4.3 release, they did not make the merge deadline, resulting in a big batch for you to enjoy now. Manifold library CSG implementation. Support for constructive solid geometry has been in the engine since Godot 3.1 and is a great tool for rapid prototyping. Nonetheless, our internal implementation suffered from stability issues and other bugs. This is one of the engine areas that does not have a dedicated maintainer to look after it. So when an open source library with the same functionality was released, we jumped at the opportunity. Manifold completely replaces the existing implementation, which is a fairly big change in how Godot handles CSG internally, but only minimally impacts the user API. Please check your projects after upgrading and report any negative consequences to us so they can be tackled. Curve domains outside of 0.1. By extending the domain of curve values beyond the normalized 0.1 range, we aim to give you greater flexibility in how to map functions and data to this ubiquitous resource. Temporary file and directory utilities. With this brand new API, you can create and dispose of temporary files and directories. In other words, you can write content on a disk without worrying about polluting user data. By default, any file directory you create this way automatically disposes of itself after use. Tools developer in particular should have a look at this feature. Then a performance boost for everyone. Scene tree system overall. The changes made to how the scene tree system works, specifically how it processes changes to the nodes, results in an editor performance increase for all projects. Moving or renaming nodes in complex scenes will be much faster experience now. Editor, no more broken paths. Universal UID support. Partial unique identifier support, a way to reference resources without relying on human readable file path prone to change, has been present in the engine since Godot 4.0, but many file types did not benefit from it yet. Now this fully supported workflow makes Godot more resistant to changes in your file system organization and therefore more suitable to large projects. To make upgrading your projects from Godot 4.3 easier, this release also includes a UID upgrade tool to automate the not so straightforward process for you. Snap, you are it. 3D object snapping. When placing 3D objects in the editor, they are now able to snap to other surfaces. This works through a collision detection ray and makes repositioning objects in a scene easier. Favorite editor items. Pin your most used properties to the top of the inspector for easy access. Replace print statement. New expression evaluator. The new expression evaluator has been added as another tab in the bottom panel of the editor. In there you can evaluate expression using the local state directly while stopped at a breakpoint. Then switch up perspective. Camera 3D preview. Adjusting a camera 3D is now much less of a chore. Enjoy a preview of its capture directly in the inspector without having to open another viewport or switching back and forth anymore. Did you know JDScript tooltips? Hovering over functions, variables, classes, etc. in the JDScript editor will now greet you with a tooltip pop-up containing further information from the integrated documentation. This includes any notes you have written yourself using the new documentation system. UIDs will show a human readable path on hover. Both is good. Shadow maps for light maps GI. From now on, you don't have to choose between fully baked or fully dynamic shadows anymore when using light maps GI. By enabling shadow maps while baking your light maps, it is now possible to use static shadows in the distance and dynamic shadows up close. The lower resolution far away will save precious resources while the level of detail close to the player is not impacted. Shortening the range of your dynamic shadows like so provides very important optimization, especially for mobile application. Continue where you left off. Persistent window state. This is quality of life improvement for anyone using big monitors or multi-monitor setups. The Godot editor now keeps track of its window state, whether it is full screen or windowed mode, which screen it is on, as well as its size and position. These settings are then automatically restored when you open the program again. Scene startup optimization. Editor load speed improves once again. Larger projects can expect a speed bump up to 3x. This benefits both the project startup and any operation that scan the file system. Small but mighty visual shader goodies. In this release, the visual shader editor receives some love. Material previews and a matching new side dock. The ability to drag and drop meshes into the visual shader area to automatically create mesh editors. Auto start for all profilers. If you want to capture profiling data while running your game without missing the first few seconds of loading a scene, you will appreciate this new checkbox. It will auto start all profilers when you run a project rather than forcing you to tab out of the game to do it yourself. Errorless first project import. No one wants to be met with a wall of errors after freshly importing their projects from a version control system. This used to happen because it is not necessary to push the .godot folder into your repository, since it auto generates upon opening your projects for the first time. After that, you have to restart the editor to get rid of all the errors caused by broken references. Not anymore. On the button, export tool button annotation, the tool developers amongst you asked and our contributors delivered. You can now create buttons in the inspector from at the tool scripts. Platforms. Android, stay on mobile from start to finish. Android editor export support. The Godot editor has been available on Android devices for a while already, but until now you were forced to switch to a different OS to create the various platform binaries. No more of that. Download export templates on your Android device and finalize your project right there. Java class wrapper fixed. You can now map Java classes to Godot objects as interface. This gives easier access to the Android SDK and lets you avoid creating a plugin for even the most basic things. Android file picker support. You can now utilize Android's native file picker in your games and apps. This creates a more seamless experience on mobile. Pace yourself. Swappy Android frame pacing library. The Android frame pacing library, also known as Swappy, helps games achieve smooth rendering and correct frame pacing on Android. This library handles multiple refresh rates if they are supported by the device, which gives a game more flexibility in presenting a frame. As a developer, you don't have to do anything to reap these benefits. They are automatic upon upgrading your project. Match theme icons. To be able to match a user system's theme, you can now provide a monochrome icon for your app on export, which will then automatically be recolored for them. There is a simple way to enhance your app's native feel. Linux, we can see you now Linux camera support. Before Godot 4.4, accessing a camera's device was only supported on macOS and iOS device. Now Linux support has been fully merged here as well. For other platforms, we still require contributors to pick up the work. Could that be you? macOS and iOS, belting the workarounds. Metal rendering backend. Metal is a low-level graphic API similar to Vulkan or D3, D12, which are both supported by Godot but not available on macOS and iOS. Until now, Godot used a library called Molten VK to run Vulkan on Metal. This direct implementation is more efficient and allows greater control over features and performance trade-offs in the future. Early results have shown that this backend is at least as fast as Vulkan and in many cases much faster on Apple hardware. In relation to this new backend, you now have the opportunity to use Metal FX upscaling as an alternative to the existing upscaler. Note that Metal support is currently limited to Apple Silicon ARM devices. Apple Game Controller improvements. We overhauled how Game Controller works on macOS and iOS to unify the code across these two platforms. Some more. Plenty of bugs were fixed along the way. You will notice improvements in the reliability of controller discovery and manipulating the rumble motors. Scripting, C Sharp and .NET. Time for an upgrade. .NET 8.0. With the release of Godot 4.0, we moved our C Sharp packages from targeting Mono to .NET 6. This version of .NET was released on November 8, 2021 and ended support on November 12, 2024. Therefore, our next release will implement and raise the minimum required version to .NET 8. Existing projects will automatically upgraded when open with Godot 4.4, while older releases will keep targeting .NET 6 to avoid breakage. .NET support for Android. C Sharp projects now support all Android ABIs and BCL APIs, formerly only 64-bit architectures. System animation. Look at modifier 3D. This new node type is used to handle 3D model procedural animation, partially replacing the deprecated skeleton IK3D. It is specialized to make a character model look in the target direction. Therefore, users can now assign angle limitations, forward access settings, and more directly instead of relying on specific bone structures or arbitrary layout. Jiggle physics. Springbone simulator 3D. The VRM Springbone has been available as an add-on on the asset library for a while now, but there were some issues that can only be fixed by a more direct implementation. The animation team refined the MIT distributed code based on the Godot's skeleton modifier 3D node and tied it in with an existing core functionality. This helps improve both usability and performance. Put a pin in it. Animation markers. Markers allow you to create sub-regions of an animation that can be jumped to or looped without playing the entire animation. These markers are also supported inside the animation tree, where you can easily create an animation node's custom timeline based on the marker. Audio. Catch this wave. Runtime wave file loading. You can now load wave files at runtime just like the OGG Vorbis audio tracks already allowed. This feature will come in handy for those looking to load user generated content at runtime, including non-game audio applications. Import. Faster imports. Betsy texture compressor. The Betsy texture compressor is a tool to compress images into various GPU texture format. It has now been integrated in the Godot game engine. Betsy runs on the GPU and is able to compress image significantly faster than our current compressor using the VRAM compressed import setting. This change reduces import time dramatically. Customize animation imports. New GLTF extension. Previously, GLTF imports only allowed you to animate properties from the list: position, rotation, scale, and mesh, blend, shape, weights. This new extension now enables animations to target custom properties to think the color of a light, the FOV of a camera, the albedo color of a material, the UV offset of a material. The mappings between Godot properties and the GLTF object model JSON pointers can be defined via GD script. Navigation. Async navigation. Navigation map synchronization has been moved to a synchronous background thread. This avoids slowing down the entire game during navigation updates, especially on lower end system. Instead, updates will happen less frequently when resources are limited. Improving the legacy code. Navigation system refactor. The navigation code may very well be of some of the oldest left in the engine's code base. Therefore, the navigation team has taken up the task to clean up thoroughly and add improvements to outdated areas. This release already contains plenty quality of life changes, from debug indicators to show the direction of navigation link to supporting the obstacle node transform and more. In general, navigation features are going to be faster, in no small part due to the pathfinding queries now using an internal heap structure. Physics. Debugging in style. Custom colors for collision shapes. Collision shapes now have the debug color and debug field properties for you to customize in the editor. If visible collision shape is enabled in the debug menu, you can even change this at runtime. Blend into the shadows. Light map. Bicubic sampling and transparency. Thanks to bicubic sampling and new anti-aliasing for direct light sample, your low resolution static shadows will now look better than ever. This method for reading from light maps smooths out sharp edges but requires a small runtime performance cost. You can disable it in the project setting if needed. Additionally, light maps now support baking transparent objects and correlatedly tinted shadows. Vertex shading. A new shading option for materials which can be turned on from within existing material nodes or force enabled on all materials via the project settings. Vertex shader reduces GPU workloads by checking the vertex whether vertices coordinates are within clip shape visible to the camera before processing the data. This option is most commonly used to achieve PSX style graphics or to target lower end devices. Call me maybe 2D batching. Batching is a performance optimization that drastically reduces the number of draw calls in a scene. The effect will be particularly noticeable in scenes with a lot of text rendering or repeated sprites sharing a texture. Previously, this optimization was only available in the compatibility renderer. This release brings batching to other rendering backends as well, which should make 2D performance comparable amongst all of them. Rendering driver fallback: in case you were trying to run Godot with a forward plus or mobile backends on a device that does not actually support Vulkan, D3, D12 or Metal, you used to be met with an OS alert that has proven to confuse users more than it is useful. This change instead automatically makes the engine fall back on the compatibility renderer, which is based on OpenGL. For moments when you do not want this behavior, you can toggle it off in the project settings. Shadow caster mask property: user can now apply a mask on a singular light 3D object to select which rendering layers are considered when casting shadows. By adding this level of control, dynamic lights can be further optimized and shadows selectively turned on and off. Variations made easier: 2D shader instance uniform. This release adds supports for shader instance uniform to canvas item shader. They allow you to assign a different uniform value to each instance of them instead of having to compile two separate shaders to achieve this. This approach is more performant than having to juggle materials and does not break batching. VFX: removing the guesswork. Emission shapes for 3D systems. From now on, you can rely on a visualization of 3D particle system you are placing in your scene instead of having to guess based on the emission shapes property alone. This works for both CPU and GPU particles. Special thanks. So these are all the people who have worked on making this release possible. So yeah, grateful to all of them. And yeah, these are the end release page credits. If you want, you can go through it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye.